4. Amos 4, and tonight we're at verse 9. Amos 4, verse 9. I've smitten you with blasting and mildew when your gardens and your vineyards and your fig trees and your olive trees increased. The palmer worm devoured them. Yet have you not returned unto me, saith the Lord. Okay, we know what's going on here. He's saying, I've been trying to call you. I put some roadblocks out and thought maybe that would make you look this way. Don't you hate roadblocks? I always look for another way besides the detour, because the detour is all crammed with people, so I make my own. But here, that's what God's doing. He's putting the detour out so that they need to turn another way. Look at Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28:15. It was very important. According to reading the Bible, God expected them, when they encountered problems, to turn to Him. Now, we should do that too. That never changed. Most of the time we don't, though. A modern Christian consults the doctor first, and then while they're in the waiting room, they pray. God, help me be able to afford this. And well, our first stop needs to be God, and let Him tell us to go to the doctor or whatever He tells us to do. Deuteronomy 28:15. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all His commandments and His statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Now, I'm not saying sickness is a curse of God. It can be, but many times it's not. I think sometimes it's Him just saying, hey, we hadn't talked in a while, give me a call. And a lot of times these little colds, we get them for a week and then they're gone. That's Him saying, hey, remember me? I'm up here. Give me a call. And we just ignore Him. That's His mercy that He doesn't just lay us down with it. Deuteronomy 28:22. The Lord shall smite thee with a consumption and with a fever, and with an inflammation, and with an extreme burning, and with the sword. That doesn't sound like a sickness. He grouped it all together. It's all devastation from God. And with blasting and with mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish. I think the mildew, he made that capital Florida. Isaiah 1 verse 5. This is a sad statement here. Eventually God gets tired of trying to get somebody's attention. And we do the same thing. You just give up. Okay, forget it. I'll go on about my business. Here he says it, Isaiah 1:5. Why should you be stricken any more? You will revolt more and more. The whole head is sick, the whole heart faint. He said it didn't do me any good to come down there and beat you up and, take your crops and all this. You still have not noticed I did it. Joel chapter 1. Joel 1 verse 4. God is progressive. He'll do these things in stages. It's like He'll, like He did in Egypt. He didn't just charge in there and automatically kill the firstborn. He could have. That would have done the job. But He didn't. He slowly, one thing after the next, He does the same thing with us. He'll, try a soft approach, and it gets steadily more and more hard. Joel 1 verse 4. That which the palmer worm hath left, hath the locust eaten. And that which the locust hath left, hath the cankerworm eaten. And that which the cankerworm hath left, hath the caterpillar eaten. I think, now I don't know, but I think I would have woke up after the palmer worm. There's a problem here. I got to have my crops. We saw it this morning when David had the famine for 3 years. And it wasn't until after the 3rd year that he called on God and said, what's all this about? Why did it take 3 years? That's just man. We're just like that. Amos 4 verse 10. More of the same. I've sent among you the pestilence after the manner of Egypt. Okay, so he's identifying it and he's grouping it. We know he did not like Egypt. So when he says, I'm doing it just like I did in Egypt, The connotation is there. They should be grouping these two. God's mad. Your young men have I slain with the sword and have taken away your horses. They shouldn't have horses to begin with. Israelites were not supposed to have horses. And I have made the stink of your camp come up unto your nostrils, yet have you not returned unto me, saith the Lord. That's not just flowery language there. Remember, Mr. Right Guard hadn't been invented yet. And these guys are out there doing battle and warfare, and when he says, I'm going to make the stink of you, come up in your nostrils, it's probably literal. There's some stink. Now, it means more than just that. I mean, to him, it's not a sweet-smelling savor like it should be. Leviticus 26. Here's this pestilence after the manner of Egypt. Leviticus 26, verse 25. Leviticus 26:25. The wording of this is good. I don't know why I've never noticed it before, but here it is. And I will bring the sword upon you that shall avenge the quarrel of my covenant. That is, you've been arguing with my law, with my covenant. So I've got an answer. We're going to squelch that. We're going to solve the problem you're having with this covenant by a sword. Wow. No negotiation. And when ye are gathered together within your cities, I will send the pestilence among you, and ye shall be delivered into the hand of the enemy. So he said, I'm going to get you all together in one little city, and I'm going to dump out some sickness. And that's why America has gone social distance crazy. We're going to see he's going to do this. He keeps doing this same thing. The reason people don't realize this, they get excited when they see Israel moving back, the Jews moving back to Israel. Okay, that's not an exciting thing. That means God's putting them there to pour out punishment on them. That's not a sign of happy good times. That's a sign of pure wrath of God being levied. And he's gathering them up. Look at 2 Kings 8. 2 Kings 8, verse 12. This is another, I see these things that seem to stick out to me. I think maybe they're not jiving with the context of the rest of this. What we've been getting so far in 1 Kings is information about Israel. And we've got the information that Elijah is supposed to go do some strange things. Go anoint the king of Syria, not Assyria, but Syria. And that's this guy, Hazael. Now, he doesn't do it and leaves it to Elisha to do. But here it is, 2 Kings 8, verse 12. And Hazael, that's the king of Syria, said, Why weep with my lord? And he answered, Because I know the evil that thou wilt do unto the children of Israel. With their strongholds wilt thou set on fire, and their young men wilt thou slay with the sword, and wilt dash their children and rip up their women with child. So this is a type of the Antichrist right here. So you'll find Herod does the same thing, and of course Pharaoh did the same thing, killing babies. Well, we're not really part of all that prophecy, but we want to get in on the action too, so we do abortions. That's the same thing, ripping up the children, literally ripping them up.
And it appears that he himself didn't realize at that time that he would do that. He says,
no, he was a nice guy. He killed his father. He just killed his dad.
I said, what is thy servant about that he should do this greater thing? In other words, he didn't know he was going to do that.
I think he did. I think he knew he was just as wicked as the Assyrians. In that same passage, it'll tell you about how he kills his dad. He wraps a wet cloth around him and suffocates him when he goes back to his land. He's a mean dude. So he's acting like, oh, I'm going to be nice to Israel, and I love y'all, and yeah, come anoint me, and I'll use your authority to take the throne. He's not a nice guy. 2 Kings 10, verse 32. 2 Kings 10:32. Okay, we've seen that Hazael is a type of the Antichrist, so you know that picture is going to repeat in the tribulation. 2 Kings 10:32. In those days the Lord began to cut Israel short, and Hazael smote them in all the coast of Israel. So that's the same thing the Antichrist is going to do. He's going to start cutting Israel down. There won't be much left of Israel by the time the tribulation is over. The Bible calls it a remnant. And I don't think we realize how small a number that's going to be. It's going to be very small. Jeremiah 6 verse 11. Jeremiah 6:11. He says, therefore I am full of the fury of the Lord. So this is something he's been getting from God. God's passed it on to him. And he says, I'm not going to hold it in. I'm going to share it with everybody. I'm weary with holding in. I will pour it out upon the children abroad and upon the assembly of the young men together. For even the husband with the wife shall be taken, and the aged with him that is of full days. Him that is full of days. Dyslexic tonight. Okay. So he's saying there, nobody's going to escape this thing. Women shouldn't be part of this. I mean, you'd expect it of the young men, the soldiers, and maybe the old generals, maybe. But here he says, we're just coming in and wiping everything out. And that's what they're going to do. Jeremiah 11, verse 22. I try to arrange my cross-references so that we can go from the beginning of the Bible to the end. It makes it easier. Jeremiah 11:22. Therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, behold, I will punish them. The young men shall die by the sword. Their sons and their daughters shall die by famine. Something's going to go on in the tribulation. That warfare, now it may be still modern warfare, but they're still going to be using the old style warfare too, with swords. We know swords are going to come back into play. And he says right here he's going to use swords. And we know that the Antichrist has a slice. Somebody took a slice of him, like Peter does in the garden. And so that sword thing's coming back. Jeremiah 18:21. Yeah. Well, they've already done it in Australia. No guns. Unless you're an outlaw. Yeah. Jeremiah 18:21. Therefore, deliver up their children to the famine. Oh, that sounds harsh. I could understand the old men and the women and the mature adults. Children? Yeah, children. And pour out their blood by the force of the sword, and let their wives be bereaved. Now, the pouring out of blood by the sword, that was in reference to the children. That's what's going to go on. Has in history past, it will in future. And let their wives be bereaved of their children, and be widows, and let their men be put to death. Let their young men be slain by the sword in battle. I realized this one day. I was reading through some of this stuff, and I realized I'm really calloused. I can read through that and it doesn't affect me. And one day it hit me, wait a minute, what if that was my kids he's talking about? Yeah. And the people he's talking to, it is their children. So we need to put ourselves in the passage when we read it, and maybe it'll come alive a little more. Jeremiah 48, verse 15. Jeremiah 48:15. That's another odd spot. God's mad at the whole world at this point. We know he's mad at Israel. And in the beginning of Amos, he told us about the heathen nations that he was mad at. Here we go. He's talking about Moab here. Jeremiah 48, verse 15. Moab is spoiled and gone up out of their cities, and his chosen young men are gone down to the slaughter, saith the king. Now, what king is that? The capital King, whose name is the Lord of hosts. The better army than this world has ever known. That king has an army, and they're doing some slaughtering. And it's Moab that's being slaughtered. Now, the interesting thing about this is Moab's going to come back into play. So he does this with the devil too. You know, he could have gotten rid of the devil a long time ago.
That's right.
He just enjoys kicking him around. He does it at least 5 times before he's gone forever. So he's doing this with Moab. Look down at verse 47. Jeremiah 48:47. Yet will I bring again the captivity of Moab in the latter days, saith the Lord. Thus far is the judgment of Moab. He said, this is as far as I'm going with them, because I'm going to bring them back and beat them up again. And he will. I'm going to read you something, and you can take it or leave it. It's the commentary by Cambridge. Now, you've got to take this with a grain of salt. Usually with Cambridge, they love to use modern versions, and usually they don't know what they're talking about. But here, I like this paragraph. This is the Cambridge Bible for schools and colleges, their intro and overview of Jeremiah chapter 48. It's the prophecy against Moab. Political disaster is new to Moab. He has not had the discipline which is now to be his lot. His lowercase God disappoints him. As Israel was disillusioned when they trusted in Bethel. Remember that? Israel said Bethel was their hope, and God destroyed it. You know, a blessing of God, when you exalt it to the level of God, God gets rid of it. Just so there's no confusion. His chosen warriors are slain. Bewail ye his fate. Dibon is cast down. Aurora questions the fugitives for news. That's in verse 20 to 28. Destruction is come against Moab's many cities. As he mocked Israel, so shall he himself be a derision. O inhabitants, take refuge like doves in the rock. That's in verse 29 to 39. Moab's well-known haughtiness has ended in disaster. I will weep for her fruits and her vineyards. Throughout the land there is woe. Worship has helplessly ceased. Signs of mourning are on every side. Moab is in derision to all. Verse 40 to 47. The enemy shall descend like an eagle. The mightiest shall be terrorized. None shall escape the visitation or captivity. Yet in the end, her fate shall be reversed. They don't go on and tell you why. But the why of it is because he wants to beat them up again. When the final payment comes due, not only for Israel, he also finishes off the instruments that he used to punish Israel with. And Moab is one of them. All right, Amos 4, we're in verse 10. Let's take the other phrase there. Amos 4, verse 10. He says, I've set among you the pestilence after the manner of Egypt. Your young men have I slain with the sword, and have taken away your horses. They shouldn't be having horses to begin with. Now, they're supposed to ride on mules, not horses. Horses were a thing that the Egyptians counted as strength. And God says, no, I want you to ride on something just as stubborn as you are, and slow. And although, you know, a donkey is a good pet. They're fun animals. My dad's got 2 of them, and they're almost like a dog. You know, they're a nice animal. But now they are stubborn. If they don't want to do something, they just like a teenager. You know. I know it. 2 Kings 13. 2 Kings 13.
Sorry.
2 Kings 13:3. Second Kings 13:3. Now, people will tell you this is the fulfillment. None of these things are the fulfillment, because none of them show the total destruction God is referring to in this passage in Amos. So all of these are pictures of it. And we see that, you'll see that even in America now. Pictures of things. But it doesn't mean the end has come. 2 Kings 13:3. The anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he delivered them into the hand of Hazael. We've seen him, the main king from Assyria. And into the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, all their days. Matter of fact, there's going to end up being 3 Ben-Hadads. I did a message on that sometime, but those are bad news, guys. Ben-Hadad becomes a title that people wear. 2 Kings 13, look at verse 7. Neither did he leave of the people to Jehoahaz, but 50 horsemen. Didn't say anything about horses, just the horsemen. And 10 chariots and 10,000 footmen, for the king of Syria had destroyed them and made them like the dust by threshing. Whew. So to just rub it in, he destroyed their horses and left the chariots to rot out there without anything to carry them. Or I guess they could hook up some donkeys to it. And he left these men there to bewail their lost jobs, I guess. He says, back in our passage in Amos 4, verse 10, he says, I've made the stink of your camps to come up unto your nostrils. I don't think he's happy. God can get very mad, and he's going to do it. Now, we're in the greatest place in the world, because even if we do something atrocious, God gets mad at our flesh, but not us, because we're always accepted in the beloved. That's something nobody else has ever had, nor ever will. Amos 8, verse 3. Amos 8:3. And the songs of the temple shall be howlings in that day, saith the Lord God. There shall be many dead bodies in every place. They shall cast them forth with silence. That is, there's just so many dead bodies, it's nothing to really, you can't do a memorial, you can't have a big service. We just got to get rid of them as quick as we can. Kind of like Hitler did when he came in there at the Holocaust. They just could not get rid of the bodies. They had them everywhere. And they burned them, but they couldn't even burn them fast enough. Deuteronomy 28, verse 26. Deuteronomy 28, 26. Israel didn't take serious their history. All of this had been written before, and they all memorized it. They loved to play religious, so they knew this stuff, but they didn't believe it and apply it. Deuteronomy 28, verse 26. And thy carcass shall be meat unto the fowls of the air, and unto the beasts of the earth, and no man shall fray them away. He says, I'm gonna kill you. If you don't do what I say, I'll just slaughter you and let the birds come eat on you. And I'm not going to scare the birds away. Oof, you're going to be bird food. Jeremiah 8, verse 1. Jeremiah 8:1. At that time, saith the Lord, they shall bring out the bones of the king of Judah, and the bones of his princes, and the bones of the priests, and the bones of the prophets, and the bones of the inhabitants of Jerusalem out of their graves. They're just desecrating everything. There's people who, I don't take this view, and I know historically it's been the view that Christians have taken. I just don't understand it. I don't have any real Bible for it. They say that you can't be cremated. I say it doesn't matter. God made you out of dust. You can go right back to it. He's not going to use that body anyway. And when it lies in the grave, he's not going to reuse that. He's going to blow those molecules apart and put you back together like something this world has never seen. I don't care if you burn it or whatever you do with it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I see that they think it's a picture of hell. Well, so is water. I mean, there's a lot of things that are the picture of the wrath of God. Flesh is not a picture of anything wholesome either. So, right.
We kind of did a study about that. There's not, there's nothing really that speaks against it. But if you read the people that were burned in the Bible, they're usually not good people.
Yeah, they burned it.
Say that God says not to do it.
Right. There's one king that they burn in lime, and that's the proof text everybody uses. And I just don't see where it makes any difference at all. Well,
what about all
whatever.
the Christians that were burned at the stake?
Yeah, what if you get burned at the stake? Yeah, it doesn't change anything.
How many Christians did they burn at the stake in the Colosseum?
Yeah.
One of them.
How many did the Catholic Church burn?
Yeah.
Was it Nero that used them as
Torches.
torches for his garden? Those were Christians.
Jeremiah 8, look at verse 2. And they shall spread them, this is these bones, before the sun and the moon. Those were their gods. And all the host of heaven, whom they have loved, and whom they have served, and after whom they have walked, and whom they have sought, and whom they have worshipped. They shall not be gathered nor buried. They shall be dung upon the face of the earth. God is not happy. And he says, the gods that you served can't help you. Matter of fact, they're going to help deteriorate your bones when you're dead and gone. Jeremiah 9:22. Jeremiah 9:22. Speak, thus saith the Lord, even the carcasses of men shall fall as dung upon the open field, and as the handful after the harvestman, and none shall gather them. Well, if they fall as dung, somebody's got to walk behind them with a plastic bag and pick it up, right? That's the way they do it nowadays. That's not natural. What is natural is an animal walks through the woods, and wherever he goes, he goes. It's all his restroom. God says that's the way your bodies are going to look when I get done. Jeremiah 15, look at verse 3. Jeremiah 15:3. And I will point over them 4 kinds, saith the Lord. The sword to slay. We've seen that. God uses the heathen nations to do it. His word can do it too. And when he comes back, he has a sharp two-edged sword that comes out of his mouth, and he's known as the word. And the dogs to tear. In the New Testament, dogs are false teachers. And the fowls of heaven. That's something satanic. And the beast of the earth. There's a beast that comes up from the pit to devour and destroy. I was thinking about this week. There's so much of the Bible we don't take as literal. And we need to. This whole thing about making the Bible all allegorical and spiritualizing it does something. It makes us jaded to the power of it. Peter says this. What did he say? Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. Now, if he meant what he said, and he did, he's saying you have an enemy, and you're probably not aware of it, so you better wake up. And he said that enemy is on this earth walking around eating people. And he is. Jeremiah 16. Jeremiah 16:4. It says, they shall die of grievous deaths. They shall not be lamented, neither shall they be buried, but they shall be as dung upon the face of the earth. When God gets mad, he starts talking about men as being dung. He said to Adam, now Adam got a nice reprimand. I know it didn't feel nice, but at the time he did get a nice reprimand from God. God said, "Dust thou art, and to dust thou shalt return." If it had been anybody else, he would have said, "Dung you are, and dung you will return to," because that's what he does the rest of the Bible through. But anyway, I've got more verses on that, but I'm going to stop. He says, "I've done all these things, and you've not returned to me." This little phrase, "you've not returned," keeps repeating throughout this passage. Look at Amos 4, verse 6. Amos 4, verse 6. "And I also have given you cleanness of teeth." We've covered that before. "In all your cities, and want of bread in all your places. Yet have ye not returned unto me, saith the Lord." It's a progression. It keeps getting worse and worse. And it's almost like he's shocked. I did this, and it's like he's scratching his head. You didn't return. Are you retarded? I mean, that's the idea you're getting. Look at Exodus 8. Exodus 8, verse 19. Here's what happens when a man will not recognize God calling him or putting a roadblock in his way. Exodus 8, verse 19. "Then the magician said unto Pharaoh," "We're done with this game. It ain't fun no more. This is the finger of God. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said." Remember, he was trusting in the magicians. He was saying, "I don't believe y'all. Watch my magicians. They're just as good as you are, better." Now these same people who had been his advisors and demonstrators tell him, "Whoa, this is God. We better leave enough alone." And he says, "I don't care. You don't mean anything to me anymore." He was putting all his trust in them before, but now he doesn't. That's what a man does. The heart will go one of two ways. It'll either get softer toward God, or it'll get harder. It has to move in one direction or the other. Exodus 9, verse 12. Exodus 9, verse 12. "And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had spoken unto Moses." Eventually, God gets sick of trying to turn a man, and he turns the man over to what the man wants. He hastens his destruction. Here he's helping Pharaoh do what Pharaoh already has decided he wants to do. Pharaoh wants to have a hard heart. God says, "Okay, let me help you with that." And he does it. Look at verse 17. "And yet exaltest thou thyself against my people, that thou wilt not let them go." Here, his heart has become so hard that it's now become, his head has become enlarged. He thinks he's exalted. He's bigger than God, even though God's done all these demonstrations. That's what Israel's like in the book of Amos. God's been doing all these demonstrations, and they're still not paying attention to him. Well, what he did in Egypt, he'll do there too. Look at verse 34, Exodus 9:34. "And when Pharaoh saw that the rain and the hail and the thunder were ceased, he sinned yet more, and hardened his heart, he and his servants." You can go through the passage. I've got all the verses there. I'm not going to keep going through them, but that's man. And if we're not careful, we'll be just like Pharaoh. I mean, we can. Doctrinally, it's Israel, the nation of Israel. And this is why God's going to punish them. You see how hard he punished Egypt. Well, Israel's no exception. He's going to let them have it too, because they've broke his commandments and his covenant. Look at Amos 4 verse... Do we have time for that? It's already been, what, an hour? Yeah, we'll pick up there next week. Amos 4:11. So we made it through a verse or two.